Let's see, so hopefully you have all the materials. You need a pencil, number 2 pencil, or I'm using an HB. You need a pair of scissors. You could use smaller scissors. These are just the scissors I have. You're going to need drawing mediums in 3 colors, so I'm using color pencils. They were gifted to me. I'm using a red. You're going to find out why once we get to the color part of our lesson. You're going to use yellow, and you're going to use blue. You also need a sheet of paper, which I have down here. You could use any kind of paper. And what we're going to make today is a booklet of our elements of art. So on each page, starting with the cover page, we're going to do all our elements of art. And see, I'm lacking some consistencies. We're going to do line, shape, color, value, form. We're going to do space, and we're going to do texture. Okay, so let's get started. Get all my things out of the way. So we've got our sheet of paper. We're going to start out by doing this to make our booklet. You're going to fold the sheet and paper in half widthwise. So right down the middle, fold it in half. Okay. You're going to open it back up, and you're going to fold it in half across the long way, just like that. So I line up the corners, and then line up the center, and then press down going across. Sorry about the camera shaking. I have shaky hands. So we've got 2 creases across. We've got going that way and that way. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors, and you're going to cut down the shortest length. So if you went down the width, you're going to cut right down there. Great. So now we have 2 sheets of paper with creases down the middle of them. So we're going to take both these sheets. We're going to put them on top of each other so that they fold into a little booklet. And we got all of our pages right there. Great. All right. So we're going to start our booklet by talking about the elements of art. So basically, the elements of art are tools that we use as artists to create our masterpieces. As you'll see, we'll go over these few fundamentals. And then in a next lesson, we'll talk about how we use those in making our art. So first of all, we're going to start. I have all my students. Oh, by the way, my name's Liberty Pearson. My students call me Miss Liberty. So I'm going to write down here, my name is Miss Liberty. I'm using a pencil right now. If you want to, you could use one of your color pencils. But I'm just going to start with the pencil. So write Miss Liberty. And then let's write the title of our project up at the top. So our project is Elements of Art. So that's E-L-E-M-E-N-T-S. Next word, of, O-F. Art, my favorite word. And we're going to go with a big A-R-T. And I want to put an exclamation point here. So great. So we've got our booklet started. We've got Elements of Art by Miss Liberty. So in order to use our pages the best, we're going to start with the cover is going to be our first element of art. And I'm going to be fun here. I'm going to use my red pencil. And if you don't have color pencils, you can use markers, or you can use crayons, but we're going to mix some of the colors together. So crayons, color pencils, or oil pastels work the best. Or you could just use your inventory of color when we get to mixing colors. So I'm going to use red, and we're going to start with line. I'm going to go ahead and title this number 1. I like to number my things. You don't have to. So we're going to start with line. All right. And line is basically, it's one point to another. So the length is longer than the width, and it's a path made by a moving point, and it's in 1D. So we're going to do 1D, then 2D, 3D. So this is 1D. So we have straight lines, we have short lines, we have long lines, we have thick lines, we have dotted lines. And if you're taking the lesson right now, if you're following along with me, you're just making the same lines that I'm making, so that you can refer back to this later. If you need to write out what I'm saying, go ahead, but I'm a picture person, so I'm just going to use pictures. We also have horizontal lines and vertical lines, and we have jagged lines, and we have curvy lines, we have curly lines, and we have swirly lines, and we have texture lines. So if you guys see, we've done our page of lines. Excuse the shaking camera. Also, my camera is hooked up to an arm that wants to move a lot. So starting our elements of art, we have done line. That's one of the number 1 basics. We use our lines to make texture and shape and form and value. So that's why we start that out first. So open to the back of that page in your book. And I think I'm going to use blue this time. And our next element of art, which we use line to make, is shape. That was my doorbell. They're going to have to wait. All right, so we got shape, S-H-A-P-E. If you're going back to write line, it was L-I-N-E. So shape, S-H-A-P-E. And shapes are fun because we use lines to make shapes, and they're flat enclosed spaces, and they're 2-dimensional. They're not 3-dimensional yet. They're 2-dimensional. So the most common shapes we have is the circle, we have the square, we have the triangle, we have a rectangle. There's other multiple side shapes that you could do. We have ovals. We'll get into ellipses when we get into shapes. We have diamonds, and we have organic shapes, which don't have straight lines. They use curvy lines. So all sorts of shapes. Okay, guys, so that's shapes. That's our second element of design. So we took our lines and we made shapes. In a little bit, we're going to get to form, but first, well, actually, let's do form next, because we take shapes and we make forms. So let's go ahead and do number 3, and I'm going to use yellow, unless you guys can't see yellow. Can you see yellow? Yeah, you could barely see yellow. I'm going to go back to my pencil then. So number 3, we're going to do form. All right, and we use shapes and lines to make our forms. Form has volume and takes up space. So we go from our 1-dimensional lines to our 2-dimensional shapes. Now we're in our 3-dimensional forms. And forms have volume and they have shape, and they have depth to them. So you could figure out the height, the width, and the depth by looking at it. So we're going to start with what we do with a circle. So we can make like a ball by either giving lines to show that it has form, or we can also show with shading. So you can see that, you know, since it gets darker on that side, it's going to be a circle. We also have boxes or cubes. So that would be a square with some depth to it, some three-dimensional space. And we could use some value to give it a little bit more depth. Also, pyramids have form to them. We'll use some lines to give it some more form. Or if you had like a cone, you'd give it some shape to it. All right, guys, so that's form. Form is the most complicated one out of the three basic elements because you're combining a lot of factors that we use in art to make one thing. But also form can help you using shape and line to create, you know, some dragon eyes. If we wanted to create some dragon eyes, give it some shape. Our lines let us know what the shapes are and what the form will be. Okay, so we're going to move on to number 4. This one's really fun because now we get to play with color. So I'm going to use a color. Let's go back to red. And we are on number 4. And 4 is color, so C-O-L-O-R. Color is fun, and now this is why we have these 3 colors. So we're only going to talk about 2 different levels of color. So that's going to be primary, and we're going to talk about secondary. You guys see that? Maybe I should just use a color pencil. We'll see. We got primary, and we have secondary. And then we're going to talk about types of these colors. We're going to talk about, I'm going to use my red. We're going to do warm, and we're going to do cool. All right, so our primary colors are these 3 colors. So we've got blue. I'm going to make a little square of blue right there. We've got red. Make a little square red right there. That shaking camera is probably bugging you guys. And then we have yellow. So those are our primary colors. And you can almost make any color you need using these primary colors. You might be able to add some black or white. And what that does is it changes components of the color. So you would either have a tone or a tint or a shade, depending on whether you add black or white to these colors. But we just did primary colors, and so now we're going to do secondary. So secondary colors are what happens after we did line. All right, so we can see all the different kind of lines we made. Short, long, thick, dotted, thin, curved, curly. All right, we did shape. So we've got some circles, squares, triangles, rectangles, some organic shapes. These are what we would call geometric shapes. We have form. So that's when we take our shapes and we give them form, we give them depth. So besides just seeing how tall they are and how wide they are, we can also see the depth, and we could see how thick and thin they are. So we went to color, and we started with our primary colors, which is the colors we started out with today. And we used blue, red, and yellow, our primary colors that we use to make our other colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to color on our paper lightly, because we are mixing colors together, and if we go too dark, sometimes they don't blend together. And I'll get into more detail about that when we get to value. So we're going to start by making purple. So we're going to mix our red and our blue together, or our blue and our red. And like I said, I'm going to lightly, I hold the pencil like this on the side so I can control the pressure with my thumb. If you go like this, it's going to be really hard. If you go like this, it's going to be really hard. So I find it's easier to go sideways and control the pressure that way. And I'm shaking the whole table. All right, so we put down some blue. Now we're going to pick up our red. We're going to put that down right on top of it. And we're going to go lightly because it'll be easier to add more color as we go on. So I'll just keep adding it on until we get a purple. And we kind of have a light purple right now. I wish I could do this without shaking my camera. And so we've made some purple in there. All right, so we're gonna go over on this other side. We're gonna take our red and our yellow. We're gonna make orange. I like to start with the lightest color first, so I'm gonna go with yellow. It's kind of hard to see the yellow. Oh, it picks up there. Go with yellow. And then we're gonna put the red over it. And we're gonna start lightly so we can control the pressure. This is easier to see in paints because it actually mixes the liquids together instead of we're just putting material on top of each other. And so that's our orange. And now we're gonna make my favorite color, which is green, by putting blue and yellow together. So like I said, I like to start with the lighter color first because it's easier to go darker. It is not easier to go lighter. Trust me, when you mix paint, if you want to make something light with white, you have to use a lot of white if you use a lot of the other color. So there we go, we blended those together. And we made green. Isn't that awesome? So we only used 3 colors and we made 6 different colors. So if you wanted to make like blue-green or blue-purple or violet, or you wanted to make reddish orange or yellow orange, you would just use more of that color that you wanted to lend to. So just a little bit more of color. So the color, the name of the color is the hue. The intensity is the purity of the color, or if you deal with paints or pencils or even hair color, the pigment and the intensity are the purity of the color. And value is just a component of the color. So we're going to move on to warm and cool colors. So out of these colors that we made, which colors do you think are warm colors? What colors make you think of the sunshine and the heat and a heater or a fireplace? If you said orange and yellow and red make you think of warm or hot things, you would be correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my yellow, and I'm going to start coloring in an imaginary rectangle. And I'm going to take that about halfway over. And then I'm going to grab my red, and a little bit along the way, maybe about an inch along the way from my yellow, I'm going to start adding my red to the yellow, and then keep doing the red all the way out till the end. So this way you could see all 3 colors. And I'm going to go back here over my yellow and blend these colors in. And then I'm going to do it again with the yellow. And so those are warm colors. So if you're doing like a warm, what we call color palette, you would be using reds and oranges and yellows. Now, which of our colors do you think are cool colors? So what colors do you think of water and cold, ice and snow? What do you picture? If you said blue and purple and green, you would be right. Those are cool colors or calm colors. So I'm going to do similar to what I did with the yellow. except I'm going to take the blue all the way across because blue is a pretty common color or color that's mixed with in order to make cool colors, because not only do we make our purple, which is by adding the red, so I'm going to color in this little section right here and make purple and add my blue to it just to blend the colors together better. These aren't the best color pencils. You do with what you can. All right, and then we're going to take our yellow, and on this part of the blue we didn't color here, we're going to color the yellow to make green. And you know, if you add more yellow to the green and it becomes yellow green, you might be able to consider it a warm color. Or if you added just a little bit of blue to the red and made a cooler red, you can also consider that a cool color. But the look and feel are really what we're going for. Wasn't color fun? I really like color because you got to get all over the place. So we covered primary colors, which are our blue, red, and yellow colors we use today. We used those colors to make our secondary colors. We used blue and red to make purple. We used blue and yellow to make green. And we used red and yellow to make orange. And then we categorize them in our warm and cool colors. So that is color. Color is going to be really important unless you want to do all black and white drawings and black and white art. But if that is the case, you're going to want to know some more about value. And value is going to be our fifth element of art. So we're going to put a 5 here, and we're going to go value, which is V-A-L-U-E. Okay, so for value, I kind of need a darker pencil than what I have to show you guys. Maybe my technical pencil will work. What do we call these? I can't remember. I've stopped using them for the most part. So we're going to take our pencil and we're going to make some rectangles. Remember, in shape we made rectangles, so you're going to do a vertical line and a horizontal line and another vertical line and another horizontal line. We're going to make 3 of these rectangles. I'm a big fan of value because you can say a lot with a little with value. And our first value block, we're going to do light to dark. So value describes the lightness or the darkness of a color or some type of medium. Shade would be darker, tint would be lighter. So we're going to start holding our pencil the way I described earlier. So this way, if you don't put your thumb down, like the pencil kind of just floats on the paper. So then you can apply pressure with your thumb. So I'm going to start out with nothing, actually. Let me arrange it. I'm going to start out with nothing. So we're going to start out with just white space. And then we're going to slowly add some pencil. You probably can't see it there, but as I get darker, or as I add shade, it's going to start to get easier to see. And I'm going to fill that in. So we're going to remember we started light, barely see it, feather on the paper. What I like to say to my students is I want the pencil to whisper on the paper, whisper. And then you could start to apply some pressure at the end and add shade. So I don't know if you could see how I went from dark to light, from light to dark, dark to light. And just for practice, I like to have my students do the value in reverse. So on this block, we're going to go from dark to light, the opposite of this block where we went light to dark. So I'm going to start out pressing pretty hard and filling in a lot of space and making my camera shake a lot. And then I'm going to lighten up. So the pressure I'm going to apply is going to be a lot lighter. Like that. So it goes dark to light. And there's different lines you can make to do this value. Like if you had paint, you just apply more paint, mix it with black to get the shade, and mix it with white to get the lighter tone. With pencils and color pencils, you can kind of play with the pressure you apply. There's pointillism, where you make a bunch of tiny dots, and the closer the dots get together and the more dots that you have, that's how you control your value. So lots of tiny dots versus a couple of dots. So that's light and that's dark. Cross hatching would be if I went this way, and then for the dark spots I went this way, and then for the darker spots I did it again and again and again until I get what I want. But for the most part, I just want you to understand light to dark, dark to light, shade, tint, and these together are tones because they're black and white. So last but not least, what I like for my students to see is value in color. So you can see really what a tint looks like with color. So you can start going from light to dark again, but use a color you like. Any color is fine. You could use the red, you could use the blue, you could use the yellow. But you're going to start out with blank space, and you're going to start with light pressure. You're going to let that pencil whisper on the paper. And then as you get further along, you're going to press a little harder. You're going to press a little harder. And you're going to press a little harder. And then there, we have our shade. And then over here we have our tint. So we're not mixing colors right now. We're just using pressure to show our value. If you were mixing colors, like I said, again, you would take the blue paint and mix it with white paint to get your tint, or you would mix it with black or more darker pigments to make your dark. So that's our fifth element of art, and that is value. So you're going to turn the page one more time. It looks like we're getting close to done with our lesson, but we still have some time, and we're getting to another one of my favorites. We're going to go to space. So space is a fun one. We're going to take our color pencil. We're going to write number 6. And we're going to write space. That's S-P-A-C-E. Don't worry if your handwriting isn't great. Mine's not that awesome either, but I love what I do, and you gotta love you. So we're going to do space. So we're going to use the pencil again, and I'm going to use my mechanical pencil because my other pencil isn't dark enough. So a way to describe space is it gives the illusion of depth, or it shows positive or negative space. So if you had an object, so let's say my object is a sphere, and I'm going to add some shade to my sphere to give it form, because without form it's just a circle. So we're going to make a sphere. All right, and we're going to give our sphere some space around it. There's some space for our sphere. If we wanted to give the space even more depth, we'd go ahead and give it a horizon in the back of the space. A little more complicated, use some perspective to show that it's in space, and then we can color the background or the negative space. And so this would be the object, and this would be the space around it. Another way to show space or depth or positive and negative space is, let's make our space, and we're going to make our form. In the foreground, it's just a little dude, happy dude. And this is our space or our negative space behind him. And so we can give it even more depth by adding a horizon line. And maybe I want to put a little tree, a little happy tree. Here's my happy tree. And let's make my tree extra happy. Extra happy tree. I like to give him happy eyebrows. Okay, so that's space. And if you want to take a minute and color your space in, like I think I'm going to make my sphere blue. And I'm going to keep my background the pencil color. Or my negative space. And then I'm going to make my floor red. And see how that added so much character to it? We used lines basically to create everything. We used shapes to make our circle. We used shading and value to make our sphere. We used texture on the floor, which is what we're going to talk about last. And we used space to create a whole artistic masterpiece. So that is space. So next we're going to move on to texture, which is super fun. That's our number 7. Texture is a longer word, so that's T-E-X-T-U-R-E. And my favorite way to describe texture is you want to make it look the way you think it feels, or you're basically visually describing how something feels. So if you wanted to show something that was hairy or furry, and I'm going to use colors so these pop, or spiky, you're going to make a bunch of tiny lines to show spikes. So let's say somebody had spiky hair. We'd do a spike. Or let's say we have a little bear and we want to show that he has fur. We'd go like that. That's a happy bear. Happy bear. One of my favorite textures to work with in my art, I do a lot of hair, is we show curls. So we're using our curvy and curly lines to show that we have curly hair. And she's happy too, because she's got curly hair. And that's how we would show texture there. Also, let's say you have a fish and you want to show that that fish has scales, also a happy fish. So we would use our lines and our shapes to create scales. And that's how we do that texture. There's so many more textures. Like I say, I like to do hair, so you could show the flow and the movement and what the hair would look like just by using different kinds of organic lines. You can also do wood grain, which is a little more complicated, but you just use the lines and use the shapes to get what you need. You can get everything you need to make art by using these elements. You can create a masterpiece by using these elements. So we made our booklet, Elements of Art by Miss Liberty. Hopefully you put your name on your work, because we like to be proud of what we make. Our first element of art was line, and we made lots of different one-dimensional lines: horizontal, vertical, jagged, curved, swirly, curly, thick, thin, and dotted. We did shapes. We covered some geometric shapes like circles, squares, and triangles, and also some organic shapes like blobs and blobs and blobs. And then we combined our skills with line and shape, and we played with form. I jumped ahead and used some values to help show form, but for the most part, we used our line to either show through the shape to show that it has form, or we used value and shading to show possibly rounded, or just where the light and the shadow hits. And I also reminded you guys that we use line and shape and form to create other elements of art. So let's say I wanted to make a nose. Well, I've got to use these lines. If I want detail on the nose, I got to add some shadows so you could tell that the nose is round instead of flat. So this is how we go from 1D to 2D to 3D. Does that help you guys? 1D, 2D, and 3D. Next, we moved on to color, which, like I told you guys before, I showed you guys before, is one of my favorites. And we used our 3 color pencils, or you could use crayons or any kind of coloring medium. We used blue, one of our primary colors, red, another primary color, and yellow, another primary color. Out of these 3 colors, we made a total of 6 colors, including themselves. Because we took red and blue together, we made purple. We took yellow and blue together, and we made green. And then we took yellow and red together, and we made orange. And then we did a little bit of categorizing. So we've got our warm colors, which are the colors of heat and fire. And we used yellow, orange, and red to show warm colors. And then we used our primary colors to make our cool colors, which are mostly related to blue. But by adding red, we make purple. By adding yellow, we make green, but they're still cool colors. And after that, we moved to value, which you guys remember when we were talking about form, we used our skills in value where we focused on using pencil pressure as opposed to mixing paints to go from light to dark, or to go from tint to shade. And then we tried it again just for practice, and we went from shade to tint. We went dark to light by applying more or less pressure to the paper. And I showed you guys one more time how to do it with color. I think it might be a little easier to tell. So this would be a tint. If we were mixing paint with blue, we would add white. And if we wanted to add shade, we could either go from the regular blue to, we could add black and make dark blue. Then after value, we moved on to space, which is one of the more complicated elements, where it is the space around an object, or our negative space and positive space. So here would be the positive space and the negative space. Here we would be showing depth in the space around our object. And like I said before, we used most of our elements here. We used color, we used line, we used shape, we used form, we used texture, and we used value. And so last we used texture. Maybe I should put space after texture, but texture was fun. We did spiky and hairy by using lines. I showed you guys one more time how to do that on a little cartoon character. We made curly hair, or curls, or if you have like a carpet that's got curls. We did some scales on a fish, or you could do dragon scales. We did hair. Someone told me this looks like unicorn hair. So yes, your unicorn tail or braid. And we did wood grain. So there it is, guys. There's your elements of art. You could get an adult to open this up and staple it for you to put it together. You could staple it like this, but just make sure you could still open the pages. So that would be your introduction to art, your elements of art. What I could do on my next session is work on a project that uses all these elements of art, which might be a self-portrait project, which I was teaching to my students at my charter school, which is closed due to quarantine. So I'd be happy to share the lessons with all of you. And thank you for viewing my video, and continue to keep yourself busy while you're stuck at home, and maybe make some art or follow another one of my videos. All right, thank you.